So I found throughout my life that there's really two people who inhabit us at the same time. And oftentimes we hear the inner dialogue that we're constantly being subjected to as our own inner dialogue. And sometimes that dialogue, in fact, most of the time, that dialogue is not on your side, right? We've got these voices that are going, and I call them like the A person and the B person. The A person is who we're becoming, who we want to be, and the B person is who we are and who we are really in our worst times. And crisis can often bring out your B personality. When you're confronted with crisis, I think one of the big things that resonates with successful people is in a crisis, you really try and be your very best. You try and become the person to get through the crisis instead of just lapsing back into fear, reaction, overwhelm. And the folks who I know who are successful are really good at channeling their A person at the time of crisis. You see this with like athletes, for example. Look at Tom Brady. What a great athlete who just pulls through in the moment of crisis. He's down, but he's still going. And many times he's had the come from behind victories. And so the question that you really have to ask yourself is, how do I become that A person all the time or minimize the amount of time that I'm the B person? The first thing you got to do is you really got to like focus on that inner dialogue. I talk to a lot of people about their inner dialogue and that mental image. The inner dialogue is caused by the image you have of yourself. And sometimes you see yourself in a positive light, but most of the time you see yourself in a negative light, negative imagery that was put into you as a kid, lack and limitation, those kinds of things. And so you got to be aware of what the inner dialogue is. And a lot of people don't even know they've got an inner dialogue going all the time. And you're processing information with an inner dialogue. If you don't know what the inner dialogue is, it's the, when I say everyone has one and you heard the, no, that you don't, that's your inner dialogue, because it's going to contradict a lot of things that you're not ready to take on. So you got this inner dialogue that's going, constantly challenging you, especially when you're trying to strive to become the A person, because to become the A person, you've got to get outside your box. You've got to be uncomfortable. It's not comfortable for that B person to grow. So they want to keep you right where you're at, which is homeostasis. It's absolute comfort, and you'll get stuck there. So you want to focus always on the A person. And the way you do that is with visualization, with imagery, with affirmations, and being conscious of the inner dialogue of what's actually going on. So for example, last night, I've reached a certain level of success. I could retire if I wanted to, but I choose to continue to work. I love the work that I do. I love helping people. But last night, I was just exhausted. I was in a negative place. And the more tired I get and the more down I get, if my nutrition is bad, you have to give yourself a break. I was super negative. And so I just went to bed at 8:30 last night. I took a melatonin and a magnesium pill. Didn't even watch TV. I made sure the TV was off because who knows what's going to come into my head watching a movie. And I forced myself into bed. And by 9:30, I was out. I was up at 5 o'clock this morning, really 4:30, 5 o'clock, I started working. I was able to knock out a whole bunch of things early this morning. There's the person who we are. There's the person we're becoming. And we've got to be conscious of that, especially in times of crisis, because I see that a lot of breakout moments happen for entrepreneurs and business people in the moment of crisis. You may be worn down, you may be tired, a crisis will hit you. If you're not prepared to deal with that, you've got to make sure that you stay focused on becoming the best version of yourself and leading your organization or yourself through that challenging time, because that's when real destruction can hit you too. If you are not prepared for that crisis, you revert back into who you were, and all of a sudden you set yourself back a year or 2 years maybe. I started this journey back when I was several $100,000s in debt. In fact, actually, even doing visualizations and all the self-help stuff had got me into a place where I was in significant debt and I had a lot of losses, sleeping on a couch, and just a really awful situation because of a lot of personal crises in my life as well. And I was doing the visualization, I was doing the affirmations, I was doing the, I'm so happy and grateful now that I have over $1 million in income. I was doing this over and over. I carried around little index cards like they tell you. And that didn't work for me. For me, I had a spiritual conversion, which aligned my faith. First of all, I got my faith aligned. But what my faith allowed me to do was to really know what in my life God's promises were for me, because the Bible says that we're supposed to be blessed, to be a blessing. And that kind of flipped a switch inside of me. But what I began to do at that point, visualization is always good when you want to change your inner self-image. But what I have found works for me really effectively is to ask myself questions designed to bring about a new image of myself. You see, because your brain is a question answering machine. Your brain is a problem solving machine. The problem is many times our brains are not given the right instructions to work on the biggest problem we have. And so we end up being drawn to low value problems, like this guy said something to piss me off. I should have said this, and you replay that image over and over again, and you get angry at yourself or angry at them. You fight with your spouse, you play that argument over and over again and try and think of things to come up with, and then you load up your gun for the next argument you're going to have. So your brain is not pulled automatically to the most important problem. It's pulled automatically to the most interesting problem, which many times is the most petty and destructive thing you're dealing with. And so learning to condition your mind to answer the question you wanted to answer, I have found has been my personal biggest change in my life that took me from just $1 million in income to well over 10 and even beyond that. So what do you mean by that, Greg? The question I ask myself now is, what does the CEO of $100 million a year company look like? And when I ask that question, like, what are the things that they do? How do they spend their time? What does their lifestyle look like? What does their body look like? And I ask that question and my brain begins to spit out answers. And so I ask myself that question every day, because right now we're pushing for $100 million in revenue. I'm already starting to ask myself the even farther out question: what does a CEO of a $250 million a year company look like? How do they act? What kind of relationships do they have? So I started asking those questions, because that automatically puts my brain not into a how do I do it, because that's just strategies and tactics. That's hard, but not the hardest thing. The hardest thing is getting yourself into a mental state where you're that guy or that woman who's doing that. And so I ask these questions, and that has become very powerful for me, because I begin to see the things. For example, my eating, my nutrition has completely changed over the last 10 years. I've given up alcohol. I am working to give up caffeine now. I'm down to half the caffeine I usually drink, because I get brain fog when I get caffeine. My sleep schedule is very regulated. I've been working on increasing my hydration. I follow people who are health experts. I train with a trainer 5 days a week at least. And I make sure I try and get an activity. I wear like my Whoop and my Oura Ring, and usually wear an Apple Watch too, because I believe a person who's the CEO of a $100 million company, his health is an extreme priority for him, and his mental state is extreme priority. You stay focused, being the best version of yourself. And the only way to do that, proper sleep, proper nutrition, proper health, and staying focused on those things. Then throughout the day, you can have hyper focus on the business objectives you need to reach. So for me, asking that question has just slingshot me. By the way, I did it when I was going for $1 million, $5 million, $10 million, $25 million, $50 million. I would ask that question, and my brain would go to work on it, and I'd come up with ideas that would help move me to the next level. Hey, so if you like today's video, share, like, and subscribe.